camera to deal with, and we are resuming our May 13th Committee of the Whole meeting. And we are now on to item number 6, confirmation of minutes. Do I see any motion? Councillor Hyde.
I move that Council adopt the April 8th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes as presented in Attachment 1.
Assuming there's no comments, I call the question. All in favor?
In favor.
And that is carried. Which moves us on to item number 7, business, the 2027 Capital Project and Major Initiatives Priority Matrix. Welcome, Leanna.
Thank you. I'm used to saying your worship, but I guess it's council tonight. I want to thank you for having me here tonight to present to you the 2027 capital prioritization matrix. As many of you do know, we have been using the capital prioritization matrix since 2023 and have made improvements on it every year to simplify our capital budget process with administration and with council. So then it gave council the ability to feel the comfort that we were analyzing each capital project and rating them. It wasn't a administration's pet project or whichever. They all had a process that they were going through. Did you want me to go through the capital prioritization matrix for any of the new council?
I think a short summary would be appreciated personally for the new council as well as for the people at home, because I also have a follow-up question about it as well.
Okay. So within our capital prioritization matrix, we have a total of nine criteria that we rate our projects on. The first one that we rate our capital prioritization matrix is basically on our project category. So this will rate from essential project to just a non-essential project or an improvement to a previous capital asset that we have, increase the service level, new facilities, or an expansion. This is the one that holds the most weight within the capital prioritization matrix of this priority project category has a total weighting of 20%. Our next criteria that we rate on is our strategic alignment. Does it align with council strategic plan? This would be directly aligned, indirectly aligned, or no alignment at all. And this has an overall rating of 10% of our total weighting in the capital prioritization matrix. Our next criteria is we then rate, does this tie to our business plans? And this would be directly aligned, indirectly aligned, or no alignment at all. And this one has a rating of 5% out of the total capital prioritization matrix. Our next piece in here that we added, I believe in 2024, was our business continuity and risk assessment. And so this one gets rated from significant impact to no impact. And this has an overall rating of 15%. Our next criteria is our operating budget impact. And this basically shows a significant decrease into our operating costs or a significant increase into our operating costs. And this has an overall impact of 10% of the capital prioritization matrix. Our next levels or criteria of what we rate our projects on is basically our financing. Is this going to be funded from external sources? For an example, a grant revenue. Then there's debt or reserve funding. And this one has a total rating of 15% of the total project capital prioritization matrix. Then we have our cost benefit or our payback or ROI. So ROI stands for return on investments. So this would either have a positive, basically a neutral, or basically it's very difficult to measure. And so when we say it has a positive ROI, that's in less than 5 years. And then the one that's kind of the in between is it has a payback, but it's between 5 and 10 years. So it would be greater than one council term to see the payback. And this one has a 10% rate, 10% of the total rating. Our next one is our service level impact. So does it have an increase on our level of services or a decrease or no impact at all? And this one has a total of a 10% weighting of the total of the capital project and major priority matrix. And our final criteria is our community and economic impact. So this one has a significant economic benefit, which has the highest rating in this grouping, or then it goes as low as minimal or no economic benefit. So this is how administration has rated all of the capital projects that we present to council. But then this also allows when council has capital projects that they would like to have administration look at, we run all of your requests through the same capital same capital project and major initiatives priority matrix. So that is all I had to talk about this. Did anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Worship. Just one quick question. Have there been any changes to the priority matrix since it was last presented to council in 2025?
In 2025, when it was presented for the 2026 budget, there has been no changes for what we are anticipating for the 2026 or 2027 budget. And I would be looking at bringing this back to our next council meeting on May 20th if there was no changes or you wanted to have more of a discussion on this.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Hyde?
Yeah, one of the pieces that really springs to my attention is the return on investment. Actually, a lot of this is so closely linked, it's probably a little bit difficult to differentiate one from the other as you work through the matrix, just because when you're talking about return on investment, how closely linked that is to your community and economic impact, your business continuity risk assessment, and your business plan. So yeah, I love this. What I don't want to dive too deep on this, but what led to the percentage? I guess the 10%, 5%, 15%. Like how did you work through that? Just a Cole's Notes version.
So over the past few years, as we developed this, we were actually looking at our surrounding communities, including Northern Alberta and even far south, is best practices of what they also use, because they're very similar to us as well. So it's pretty tough to compare ourselves to Calgary or Edmonton because they have a larger bucket of money than what we do. And so we basically used surrounding communities and best practices. And this isn't finance or senior leadership that's going through this. This is actually an entire committee of all of the budget owners within the town of Strathmore. So it's not the fire department that has all their pet projects and they're rating all of theirs at super high, or finance is saying, oh no, this is way more important than life safety, which of course that would never be. Life safety is always the number one priority here for the community. And one of the things is we wanted to have the least amount of bias from staff and council, and gave us a fallback. So we had a reason to be able to show how we got to where we got.
Yeah, so just following up on that, the pilot program for training firefighters must have scored incredibly high on this matrix, or does that fall anywhere? Something that runs through this?
That's more of an operational thing. I mean, maybe to address, like, it's very hard for municipalities to get ROI. We're not in the business of generating a profit. So there's limited examples, which is why it gets a low ranking. I mean, one I can think of here was a couple years ago, we built the sprinkler trailer. So in the event a grass fire is coming in, it's very common now to have these things. So we actually built our own, and it's to basically protect the buildings, the outbuildings, the houses on the edge of town. And my recollection of the discussion with council at that time was we could rent that out and make money, but the direction of council was only if you're absolutely like 200% sure that we're not going to need it ourselves, right? Because the public safety was deemed by that council to be more important than generating a profit, right? Which is kind of why it's got that 5%. It's really, again, we're not in the business of generating a return for our shareholders, right? And a profit every year. So, yeah.
Mayor Fuel?
Thank you. Just two quick ones. Leanna and anyone else who wants to weigh in, has this matrix, and this is just for my own knowledge, has this matrix been a process that was difficult or slow at the start, or does it get pretty quick for you folks as you go through it now that you've been using it? I'm just curious how that process has been for the financial team, for all the teams, basically.
I can honestly say, I think it's brought us closer as a team because it's not you versus me, it's us. And what is the best value for the community? And is it possible, knowing that we only have a limited amount of funds, we can negotiate between the team going, well, if we delay this by a year, what could we do instead? It was no different than when we transferred the funding from the wastewater rate study, I believe it was this year, to having the water continuity funding. And so that was kind of a negotiation between the administrative team going, okay, this was really great idea. We think we should be doing this, but then thanks to our shortage in water in 2025, it was kind of like, we know that we have to prioritize our water a little bit faster than we have to prioritize our wastewater. So
Thank you. And this whole budgeting process that CIO Scoble and you and your financial team and Kara has put in is so much better than when I started. We used to have a weekend where we would all have huge binders, and you would see counselors questioning the operations person about whether or not they needed a certain truck. And it was just, to me now, when I look back on it, it was so out of line. And I like this matrix idea, and I'm glad that it's become a flexible and an easier process for you guys to use. And I guess my only other question is probably the matrix thing has been the reason there's no statue of me yet in front of the municipal offices. It hasn't gone through all the, yeah, thanks.
So if there's no other questions.
No, sorry, there is a lineup. I was just imagining a giant gold statue of Mayor Fuel, Ella Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, the crowds that would come to see it. Sorry, I'm off. Councillor
And the
Chisholm.
bird droppings.
Thank you very much. Just a couple comments. The first one is, as you know, successful companies and operations, when they can make data-based decisions, that typically is the best business model and the best decision-making tool to help you gain cohesion, collaboration, etc. And this matrix is very well done. I do have a question on, and you can direct me, CA Scoble or Leanne, on the analysis of the full life cycle analysis. Do these areas, would they reach into that? Would they take that into consideration from a full life cycle analysis?
To the best of our ability at the moment, of course, we have the asset management program under development. So you know, it's probably not as data rich as we would like it now, but once that program's completed, we can, you know, you know, it's the total cost of ownership, life value. I call it total cost of ownership. It's the capital purchase, it's the operations cost, but it's also ultimately, is there a salvage value to it, or are we going to have a reclamation cost afterwards, you know, end of life cost? So, you know, we're doing the best we can, but it's only going to get better as we get the asset management program developed.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I definitely like the concept of having, you know, the way of sort of rating these through some sort of discrete questions that need to be asked. I do have one question, though. There is some overlap between the strategic plan that the council and administration sort of co-developed at the beginning of this year, and a lot of the other sort of subcategories, the financial and so forth. My question is there wiggle room in there to give strategic planning a little bit more than 10%? It just seems that that was something we all sort of worked towards together, and if it doesn't fit a strategic plan, then it gets disqualified more easily. If it fits strongly with strategic plan, then it actually has a slightly chance or a better chance of getting. Is that something that we are able to consider in future?
I guess my initial comment to that would be the corporate business plan has two components. So it has the A list, which is activities supporting council strategic plan, and then it has the B list, which are not things necessarily related to the strategic plan, but they're corporate things. So this is where, you know, our like our software things that we're looking at, our hardware, our software, corporate things that we may have to do, like, you know, say, I'm not saying we will, but say under the new Bill 28 coming in that we're, you know, say we have to buy a piece of software to be compliant with that. That's kind of that. I don't, Leanna, did you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I was going to add, if council did desire to change any of them, this is really your prerogative. What administration has done is just looking at other communities and best practices. But of course, we can always change one level to another. It's not administration's recommendation at this point.
I guess my suggestion would be strat plan is strat plan, and it includes the corporate business item plans that support the strat plan. And maybe we want to tweak it more that this is the corporate plan. Like I said, if there's a regulatory change that comes and we have to do something or buy something to be compliant, that's kind of that B list.
Yeah.
And typically, you know, we don't, like I said, that's kind of administration's list, whereas the A list is kind of administration's list supporting council in your strategic plan. So from hearing the comments, if anything, perhaps we just need to provide a little more clarity or a bit more description and break that line so that corporate business plan items supporting council get a higher ranking than just overall corporate items that we need to look at, notwithstanding some of them can have legal or regulatory implications.
Okay, well, that's a good enough answer for me. Yeah, I guess we can just leave it, you know, from my opinion, we can leave it as it is right now, but I'd like to, you know, maybe in future we could look at sort of giving a little bit more to the strategic. I just feel that because it's something that we'd collaborated on and we'd sort of all agreed upon, it just seems relevant. But as you put it, with corporate, like the A and the B, I can understand that. Thank you. Thank you, Leanna.
Do any other councillors or the mayor have any comments specifically on the weighting then of the prioritization matrix, or any thoughts on that? My thought on that, and perhaps I'm getting into some kind of circle logic or reasoning here that could never end, but to me, our strategic plan sort of directed our administration to create something along the lines of this prioritization matrix and stick to it and use it. And so just simply by creating this and managing our finances so diligently, I see that as an achievement on our strat plan, but then I go back into the circle. I just think, I just have a final comment here then, is I think what the community is seeing here when they look at the prioritization matrix of capital and major investments is the level of diligence and the details with which our admin considers in order to make capital expense recommendations to this council. We take managing our tax dollars very seriously, and this takes the bias and feeling out of the decision-making as much as possible. I think this is excellent, and keep up the good work. Is there any other comments on this? All right, we will move on to item 7.2, Municipal Enforcement Service Department Overview. Welcome.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. I have no formal presentation prepared for today. My report is there, and if there's any questions of Council, myself or Sergeant Pressman or I will try to do our best to answer them.
Yeah, I do have one question. So I gave this a read last night, and so we have a 1 to 3,750 ratio for municipal enforcement, right? And is that based on the census that was taken, the last census that was taken, or is that based on what we think the population is going to be at the end of this census this year?
Through the chair, Councilor Brown, that number is approximately, we use about 15,000. We recognize that the previous census in 2021 is 14,573 or whatever that number is. So obviously that number will change based on when we get the census data from next year, next year. So that numbers could obviously increase or decrease. We expect the population to increase, but until we know such a thing, that ratio is just an approximation.
Okay, and based on that ratio where we're seeing a 1 to 3,750, compared to the last time the census was, whereabouts were we when that census was done? Has the margin increased, or are we about the same area? Like, how close are we as far as enforcement?
Through the chair, Councilor Brown, the enforcement staffing numbers haven't changed in several years. So obviously that number would be slightly larger with the decreased population from, I guess, 2017. I don't know that population off the top of my head, but like I said, the staffing numbers haven't changed since then.
Okay, that's, and so 2017 we had 14,000, you said?
I think it was 14,337. Mark, as Director Pretzlaff said, we've used 15,000. You know, we have the federal census underway, but, you know, based on other data that we have, like water consumption, we're 16,000 current is a pretty good number, pretty good estimate, so.
So we've gone up in population by about 4%. Is that about? My math is terrible today. Oh,
Oh, yeah.
9%.
Say 1,500 on 14,000, like you're 9-10% somewhere in there.
okay. All right, thank you for that.
Councillor Chisholm?
If you can give me just a little insight, in reading the report, there are no best practices associated with enforcement staffing levels. Any insight on, I know data is capped, is there somewhere where data and results are captured that will help us with that data to determine best practices, i.e. staffing levels?
Through the chair, ultimately, Councillor Chisholm, the staffing levels and the ratio is determined by council. If you wish to increase it or decrease it, that's something that, you know, that's obviously the preview of council. In terms of stats and data, we can provide some information. Unfortunately, some of our systems are old and antiquated, and as CAO Scoble indicated, one thing that we'd like to move forward to is some better software that allow us to track the items better. Right now, the municipal enforcement team gets calls to action two ways, either through CCFs or directly, or when they initiate a contact, as they will, whether it's a traffic stop or if they observe something. So there's two different mechanisms in where their data is tabulated, and unfortunately, some of those things are manually calculated.
Councillor Hyde?
just looking at the operational hours for the municipalities that you used as a comparison in your report, versus what we're doing here, and you're going to correct me hopefully if I'm way off base. So we have our municipal enforcement working from, sorry, I had it in front of me.
7 a.m. to 5 p.m.
7 a.m. to 5
There's a typo in the report, so my apologies for that.
No, that's fine. And then I'm as I scroll down to the operational hours of towns like High River, that seems wild, from 8 a.m. till 12 a.m. Does that include on call time? Is that actually boots on the ground on the street, or just how they're able to have that kind of coverage when their ratio, when they only have 3 people online?
Through the chair, Councillor Hyde, my conversations with the town of High River is that they have a manager that works Monday to Friday, typically, that 8 to 5 shift or something like that. And they have their 2 other municipal enforcement staff working a 12-hour shift. So they operate with 1 individual on it at a single time. That's something that the town has never really supported. We've always had 2 officers as a state safety ratio, unless otherwise, just different circumstances. So that's the hours that they gave me. I don't understand their rationale. I can't predict it, but that was their conversation I had with their manager of municipal enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Fuel?
Thank you. Director Pretzlaff, my question is not really about increasing services. It kind of follows or piggybacks on Councillor Hyde's question about our hours. And I totally understand the hours as far as when the school is on. My question is there any merit? Is it unwieldy? Could it work to adjust the hours for July and August so that officers would start later in the day, but they would work later when you hate to typecast teens or young adults, but some of our problems have been in around the, Kinsman Park and speeding on the roads and things like that. Is that something that has any merit where we adjust for 2 months the start and end times of our enforcement officers? And would there be a huge impact on them as far as that kind of an approach?
Your worship, as indicated in my report, occasionally the MES will flex their hours or otherwise in contract a service provider to provide additional complement public safety. Typically we've increased the overtime hours associated with Kinsman Park to monitor the challenges we've had with vehicles in the pavilion parking lot. Obviously, when we're aware of an incident or aware of a public safety matter, the staff flex their hours accordingly. Ultimately, 2 months is something that we could definitely look into, and we could track data. But as I indicated in my report, typically those less than 2% or approximately 2% of the calls from 2026 after our request for service after the regular business hours. So we haven't seen a lot of demands or calls for service. Obviously that's, if there's somebody doing a vandalism or something like that, those are not necessarily calls for service, but that's something we definitely can explore.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Yes, so I did read in the report, and by the way, thank you, it's very well written. I did read in the report that if another municipal enforcement were added, it's roughly the cost of about $250,000. Is that what I read?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor Brown, that's approximate numbers. Obviously, we only have 4 municipal enforcement vehicles and obviously four staff members. The cost of a new vehicle is, an SUV type style is a little over $100,000 once you do all the required additions and things like that. And then the staff, the manpower is that other additional one. We've covered off some of the additional equipment as best we can, whether it's vests and other equipment, but that's an approximate.
Right. And what would the lead time be what need time or lead time would be needed to sort of create that position, just asking as a formality? Like, how long would it take to do? Is it about a year? Is it 6 months? I mean, you've got to hire someone, you've got to train them, you've got to do a lot of things.
Yes, through the chair, Councilor Brown, the lead way obviously is the HR recruitment. The majority of the candidates that we're looking for already, we were already required that they have that specific training that's required, and then obviously the commitment from the town is to, and in reality, sponsor them to the province, that we are enabling them to this position, that they're being appointed that way. So that lead time is can be lengthy depending on the province. The biggest time, is for an order of a vehicle. Sergeant Press, do you have an idea on the length of the vehicle?
Through the chair to Councillor Brown. Thank you for the question. Just comparing to some of our neighboring communities close to us, they've ordered a few new vehicles lately, and the lead time is anywhere between 4 to 6 months, depending on equipment availability through our local contractors.
Okay. Okay, great. Appreciate that answer. Thank you. So we've got a cost and time estimate to, if we wanted to staff up and add another person in there, another vehicle. Do you have an approximation on what it would cost? And I should have asked this prior to the meeting because I don't like to surprise people. We're not supposed to be doing this. To extend the hours to 7 p.m., let's say, on a regular basis, can we like open up the shifts? I'm just trying to get a bit more coverage. I did hear from some folks this summer that, you know, they might want later coverage.
Through the chair, Councilor Brown, unfortunately, we haven't done the math to extend that hours. One thing that we could propose is adjusting the overtime bank or budget for this department. We could offer some voluntary overtime shifts to the existing staff that would enhance the coverage. Some of that could be offset by additional traffic enforcement efforts. But those numbers, unfortunately, the cost recovery would be approximately 2 to 5 years, because if there's a traffic ticket issued, it goes through the province and goes down that process. We don't see the revenue associated with that for, again, that 2 to 5 years. So if you're asking for a cost recovery model, we'd have to figure out some more math. If you're asking just to increase the overtime staffing budget there, we could definitely come back with some information as a part of the budget if you wish.
Okay, I would really like it if we could bring the latter back at another meeting, if that's possible. Thank you. Thank you for your time too. Great presentation.
So I heard that it's $250,000 to increase the staffing by 1, and that of course takes into account the cost of the vehicle. But and I'm not proposing we're doing this, I'm just interested. If we were to increase the staffing by 2, presumably we would not need to buy 2 new vehicles then. So that would change the cost?
Through the chair, Councillor Wiley, each member of the enforcement team would require their own vehicle. So,
so when we say that there's always 2 on shift, it doesn't mean that they're sharing a vehicle. It just means they're both there in case the other one needs
That's
backup.
correct.
I understand. That makes sense. My question then is, I've read now, I think, CAO, you were sharing this with us, that admin is developing some type of a prioritization method then that would also cover new positions, some way, like we just heard the presentation on our prioritization matrix for capital investment. Could you tell us a little bit about what's in the works from administration when it comes to adding new positions?
So council, in this budget cycle, you've approved implementation of priority-based budgeting. Phase 1 of priority-based budgeting is actually complete, or, in that beta version, that's that service level inventory that you're talking about. So the next subsequent stages would involve administration and council in different, I guess, focus groups, if you want to call it that, but identifying the priorities, right? So what priority-based budgeting allows you to do is to shift resources from areas that are deemed to be a lower priority to areas that are deemed to be a higher priority. So we're going to go through that and implement that probably over the next 2 years. And then, you know, I'm not going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use apples and oranges. If council decides that it likes oranges more than it likes apples, then you're going to put less money into the apples and more money into the oranges. So I guess translating that to services and programs and infrastructure in the community, that's kind of the theory behind it.
I just think that's so appreciated because I know for myself, I'm like a kid in a candy store. I'm always attracted to the thing that's right in front of me. So you tell me how excellent our communications team is. I want another employee. How great our economic development's going. It's like, yeah, let's add service levels. Our municipal enforcement, they're awesome. Let's just amp it up. But it was the same thing we were all gushing about how good it was that we had a capital investment prioritization matrix. It's really going to be great in the next couple of years to get this because in the same way I just said, we take managing our dollars very seriously. It takes the bias and feelings out of our decision-making as much as possible. Having a prioritization matrix of sorts for adding positions is going to be very appreciated. So admin, thank you. I do have some further questions specifically about municipal enforcement. So as a councillor, our job is to direct administration into what we want to see happen, the what. Where admin figures out how will they go about doing it? If council wanted to see an increase in coverage for the summer months, there are a variety of ways admin has mentioned that we could make this happen, the how. I've heard talk about private security. I've heard talk just today about an overtime bank. There's talk about what I would call like a revenue neutral model where we just shift the hours of coverage. I'm just curious if admin could specifically talk about those three things again and maybe where their thoughts would be on that being a solution. Again, it's revenue neutral models where we're just kind of shifting around hours during the summer. Private security, could they take some of the load off of the excellent work our municipal enforcement's doing? And then I'd like to hear more about that overtime bank. I thought that was interesting too.
So I'll start it off and Mark and Sean can jump in as appropriate or correct me on what I get wrong here. So, you know, what we heard from the mayor is just changing the hours in the non-school months. So municipal enforcement puts a lot of effort into school zones when the schools are in. You know, when they start up in the morning and when they're, you know, finishing up at the end of the day, especially when the kids are coming and going from school. But obviously in July and August, the kids aren't in school, so we could maybe shift some hours a little bit there during those 2 months, right? So start a little later and finish a little later is really, so it's just a shifting of hours. There's not really any additional hours or that. We have successfully used private security in hot spots such as the farmers market parking lot. So it's actually been found to be a very effective and cost-efficient way, more so than bringing in MES officers or extra RCMP or whatever, right? So that's been a very beneficial program. I think what Mark was talking about with the overtime here is there's an opportunity to offer some additional shifts to the existing MEOs on an overtime rate. And that could be done. You know, I guess probably the question to council here is when we talk revenue neutral is, you know, there's a lot of philosophies in law enforcement in general, education and awareness or enforcement. You know, and it's, you know, sometimes a lack of tickets doesn't mean bad things. It means that the effort's going into education. So a revenue neutral overtime model would be, I guess, basically ensuring that we have a minimum quota of tickets actually issued to residents to pay for that overtime. Otherwise, if we continue municipal enforcement operations the way we do now, it would actually be a cost because we do put a high value on education and awareness of residents. So that overtime would be an incremental cost as opposed to offsetting that with ticket quota, so to speak.
So, because the problem I'm hearing from residents is that their perception is there's an increase in speeding, stunting on the roads. These are not normally things we think of when we think of our municipal enforcement or peace officers. They say there's loitering, noise, nuisance in parks, parking lots on weekends in the summer. Residents are claiming there's an increase in petty crime. Their feelings of intimidation from transient populations and to stereotype the youth. So if council were to think that this is something that we would be interested in directing administration on the what strategy would council use to pursue if this was a priority in the next 3 years of our term? What would be our next step to bring this to admin in a way that is obviously respectful of administration's time? I mean, it's obviously a council priority. Safe streets is one of our council priorities. So what would administration like us to do if that was the will of the council to direct you further?
Well, I mean, I think we've kind of explained the different hows. I guess we would just be looking for some direction on that, and really philosophy. Is it an incremental cost that council's willing to take on, or is it something that you want us to make cost neutral? I guess would be the direction we were looking for.
So would the most appropriate time to have this discussion again is when we're budgeting for the next round and when you bring to us the service level of reviews? Is that the best time?
Yeah, admittedly, we're kind of in a mid-cycle here because, we've just kind of kicked off the service level inventory. Typically, we seek approval of that in March so that we can begin our budget cycle for the year. So we've kind of got a little bit overlap. Like snow is a good example. We did our traditional fall snow presentation, but then it's also in the service levels. So going forward, we would be looking for direction in March or April when we bring those service levels forward, and then council approves it, and then we build the budget accordingly over the next few months to bring to council in the fall. So, we're just in a bit of an awkward stage here right now. We're just kind of transitioning. So, we brought the service levels forward, I guess a couple months ago, and I don't think we've approved those yet. So. But we are getting a little late into our budget cycle because ideally we'd like those done.
I think it was the service level review that got me to make this motion for this. I don't actually find this an awkward stage. Essentially what you're saying is we kind of have a year to sort of to hum and haw and put some thought into this and listen to our community about what it is that they want and spend the summer being very mindful of what we're seeing out on the streets. That seems like a good amount of time to make an informed decision on this.
Yeah, I think I guess to clarify what I'm trying to say is we're getting a little tight for budgeting for 2027, but if it's something council with this information wants to think about and collect more information from residents. I should note in the communities, the citizen satisfaction survey we're coming out, we always try and pick areas of focus in addition to the general questions. And now that public safety is a priority of this council, where the survey next fall is going to query the residents more on public safety aspects, which is something we haven't done. So we'll be getting, I guess, more information from residents than we have in the past on this particular topic as well. So if you want to action something this summer, it's kind of the 2026 budget, which is approved. It could be an incremental cost. If you want to look at something for 2027, then we should get some direction shortly. Or if you want to reflect and look at something for 2028, include the results of the citizen satisfaction survey. So you kind of got three options now, next year, or 2028.
What I'm hearing is a timeline I actually quite like. It gives me and hopefully the rest of council the summer to sort of look at what do the streets look like, what are residents saying. And then it means in the fall, come September, we're going to be getting a survey back where citizens will be ranking their perceptions on safety, and that gives us the data that we need. And then that would fall then to the sort of next winter into the spring, is actually making those decisions. So I like that timeline. I don't know if any other councillors have comments on that. Sorry, Mayor, I keep missing you up there.
That's okay. It's hard sometimes. I guess having heard from Councillor Brown and yourself and some of the comments that residents have been making, I'm just wondering, is there anything wrong with an immediate response as far as a trial or a pilot of those adjusted hours for July and August of this year, and just see if we have an impact that residents notice, if we have a decrease in things, if it's something that can be instituted without a great deal of hardship for our officers or Director Pretzlaff. It might be a way of demonstrating that we're acting on things and we're trying out one of those three methods that have been brought up, and it should be a zero impact to cost. But that's my suggestion as far as what I would like to try, is just see if it would make an impact this summer for July and August. Thank you.
So if that was the will of council, obviously we're at a committee of the whole meeting, so no motions can be made. What if that was the will of council? What would be the next step?
Yeah, I think what we would hear is we would take the recommendation away and then we would bring the service levels back for council approval. And in that service level, we would adjust, it would be the normal hours of 7 to 5, September through June, and then July and August would be summer hours, whatever we come back with, whether it's 8 to 6 or whatever. We'll
So
take
that would
away.
be an example of us directing you on what we would like to see happen, an increase in hours, and then you would come up with the how, and that might include overtime bank, that might include private security or something like that.
Yeah, I think for what Mayor Fuel's proposing, it would be just a simple, council gives direction that the July and August hours will be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. or what have you, but we can take that away and come back with something, and if council doesn't like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and you want 8:30 to 6:30, you can amend it at that time.
And that CAO is not a matter of bringing back the entire service level thing, that's just bringing back the single page on municipal enforcement.
Correct, but I think overall the document has to be approved, but that
Okay.
could be one small change within it that we'll highlight for you based on what we're hearing today.
Okay, so I've made my thoughts known. Mayor Fuel has. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, actually, I really like what you're proposing, Mr. Mayor. I do think that what we have here is essentially three different ways that we could tweak or augment what we're doing. And it's not really a question of if it should be done, it's really a question of can administration do it in a manner that is suitable and if it's effective, right? And so obviously we defer the how to administration to execute. I do like as well that we've got sort of the three different ranges. So there's the immediate, which is, hey, let's tinker and potentially let's just put it out there and see if we can. The other being, and it's revenue neutral, and the other, of course, being the citizen survey. I actually really like that because the timing, I think, is ideal, because I think that the presentation of the citizen survey, correct me if I'm wrong, CAO Scoble, the presentation of that is just prior to the budget. Is that right?
I think, yeah, we usually launch it in September, bring it back mid-October, but I don't know, Director Rusk, you're probably more on top of the timelines than I am.
Yes, that is typically our goal for sure, is to ensure that council has that information prior to the budget deliberations.
Perfect. And so why that makes a lot of sense is if there is a sense of urgency from the public that something needs to be done, we can sort of make those budgetary decisions and sort of go for that mid-range as opposed to sort of pondering the long term, which would be yet another year out. So I really support those first two. I like being able to, I think that the town and council have the ability to make decisions in the short term and also in the midterm. And yeah, I think that if we stay focused on those, we can certainly adjust according to that. But I do like your proposal, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
now obviously we can't make a motion tonight, but I'm not hearing any objection from council for administration to bring back to us the service level review, particularly in relation to municipal enforcement service. I believe that's everything from council. I just want to say that I'm very pleased with the work that our municipal enforcement service is doing. I have spent a lot of time this week just reflecting on what an excellent job that team is doing. CEO has been providing us with information just on sort of comparing and starting to think about what other municipalities are doing and what has worked and not worked. And it's made me even more appreciative of the hard work that our team is doing. And so asking for this report was in no way a criticism of the work they're doing, and I just want to thank them. And that takes us to business number 7.3, Municipal Development Review, Module A. And welcome.
Okay, so good evening to the committee and the public. We want to start by thanking committee for the opportunity to speak with all of you this evening. Specifically, I want to provide the committee and the public with a brief refresher on the town's municipal development plan review. Our main purpose, though, of speaking with you today is to discuss and present Module A to the committee, which represents the first update, the first amending bylaw to the town's MDP that results directly from the MDP review. So the goal this evening is to garner some feedback from the committee on Module A and to provide the public with a first look at the bylaw. Just a quick refresher, we're going back to Planning 101 here, and to jump in, the background in short is that every municipality in Alberta must have an MDP under the Municipal Government Act. When we take a broader look at that, in Alberta, that takes us to the planning hierarchy, which is on the screen, which is most commonly depicted as an upside-down pyramid, and it describes the level of detail that's involved with each type of planning that we do here in Alberta. And more specifically, as you move down the pyramid here in Strathmore. The hierarchy is representing provincial legislative and policy documents that are implemented by decision makers, including provincial departments, agencies, regional boards and agencies, and municipal governments. For us in Strathmore, recently, we've completed an intermunicipal development plan with Wheatland County, and we're now working hard on finalizing an MDP update using a modular approach, something that I'm going to get into shortly. But in the hierarchy, we're currently at the green oval. That's where we'll be talking about today. And then as we move downward from that green oval on the screen, we see municipal items like area structure plans, land use bylaws, and so on. And that's exactly what makes updating the town's MDP so important, because the MDP informs those documents that are further down the pyramid. So in terms of our MDP review, I wanted to give committee sort of an important update first. As we know, we've come out of municipal elections, and council now has identified strategic priorities and finalized a strategic plan. And the town's MDP is sort of in a position now where it's ready to help out with this. And specifically, the challenge is, well, how do we get there? So with that in mind, Development Services has shifted focus from more of a repeal and replace, so taking the current MDP and repealing it and replacing it with something that's brand new, to what we're calling a modular approach, which will update the MDP in shorter, more manageable components or modules that injects sort of innovation modernizations into the MDP at each step along the way. So this approach is attractive for a number of reasons, but as for some examples, it'll allow for quicker and more flexible completion of the review itself. It's also an opportunity to quickly align council's strategic priorities with the MDP, and it'll also enable proactive decision-making, and one that's not on the bullet point is that it actually also helps and positions town administration, departments, and staff to do better work and also to help implement those strategic priorities for council. So what else will the modular approach accomplish? And this is important as well. The modular approach will still do what any repeal and replace approach would have done in terms of aligning the MDP with provincial legislation. and supporting regulations. It'll do the same in terms of reviewing and aligning the MDP with existing plans, existing studies that have been approved by council. And then, of course, if anyone's talked to me about planning at all, the plus one for us in development services is that we want to continue getting better at administering the planning process in Strathmore. So I'm talking about being creative, being efficient, being innovative, finding ways to modernize, and connecting with residents and businesses in a way that makes planning easy, or at least easier. And the MDP review is one of the best ways to make some serious headway on this type of stuff. So now that we're kind of caught up, Module A itself, I wanted to let the committee know it will be the largest amendment that the committee and council will end up seeing. The focus of Module A is largely on growth management, fiscal sustainability, and economic development. I've estimated, looking at the document, that after Module A, the update will be about 50% done. So in terms of volume, this bylaw right now, the draft is at 67 pages. I wouldn't anticipate seeing that again after this point. This is really the heavy lifting, if you will. There's also some other crucial updates in this bylaw package. For example, it sets up how the MDP will be implemented, how we can approach reviews of the MDP in the future, and how we'll know if it's working, and then also how to know when we need to make changes. And then there's also a series of introductory updates, and as well as technical and stylistic updates. So I'm talking about things like brand new cover pages, figures, tables, maps. I did want to mention our GIS specialist, Seth Whitney. He deserves tremendous credit for the mapping updates that are in the back of that bylaw. He worked very hard on those with us. And because the bylaw's voluminous, there's really three main highlight areas that I want to touch on for committee. The first is growth areas. So this is likely to be the largest update, and there's a shift towards ensuring that good land use planning is taking place in Strathmore in terms of managing growth. So it introduces a deliberate, strategic approach to guiding the amount, the rate, the location, the type, and the quality of future urban development in Strathmore. And this will be accomplished, or is proposed to be accomplished, through establishing what I would call a spatial foundation. So it's a hierarchy of growth areas, and all of this is shown on new map A, planned growth areas, which is on the screen right now on the right-hand side. So the bylaw itself will include the table that's on the screen that really takes that entire section and sort of condenses it and summarizes it. But in the interest of time, if we think just about the development status line, which is the first line in the table, you can see the difference between the three types of growth areas that we're contemplating. So you can see on the left, you move from areas that are flagged or identified as having long-term growth potential, but there's no ASP, and no ASP process has been activated. When you move into sort of the middle ground, which is a future growth area, those areas are where you'll find midterm growth potential, and those are areas that have area structure plans approved, but no phases have been started or completed. So that plan, if you will, is still intact. Nothing has been built or developed there. And then as you move to the right, you would find active growth areas. So these are areas in blue on the map to the right. And these, if you wanted to call them shovel ready for development, they are ASPs that are approved, but there are also ASPs that have phases at least started, or they've had phases completed in the past. So that was the criteria that was used to create those three areas. Sorry, and I want to come back to this quickly. So when you move through this hierarchy, you'll see in the bylaw and the way the policy is structured that there's supporting criteria. So it's a criteria-based policy set that allows for these growth areas to move through that hierarchy. And if you want to say flip colors from gray to blue, or sorry, from gray to green to blue, you would do that through applications to council, and you would do that through meeting certain, or demonstrating that you meet certain criteria. So the second highlight is highlight number 2 is strategic intensification. In short, what this means is giving council the necessary tools to assess and make good planning decisions on where it's appropriate to see things like redevelopment, increased density. And really, by extension, this criteria can also be determined or used to determine where intensification is not strategic, where it's not appropriate. So it's giving council a set of tools to assess and look at development proposals in already urbanized areas of the town.
Glenn, if we have any questions, should we be asking while you're presenting, or would you like us to wait till the end of the presentation?
I'm willing to do whatever the committee would like to do. I maybe wait until the end if that's
You prefer to
easier.
wait to the end?
I'm really flexible, so whatever you prefer.
Okay, I have a question about
Sure.
strategic intensification. So when I was looking at the municipal development plan module A, I saw a lot of numbers and about our goals to densify. Maybe I'm asking during the wrong time. I'm thinking specifically about it was like certain number of households per hectare. Is that in this section?
The references to units per hectare that's in the planned growth areas, which I can come back to maybe at the end and explain quickly.
Sure.
Okay. So the strategic intensification, the criteria that you'll find in the bylaw that are meant to assist council in making decisions, it's important because there needs to be a balance struck between making good use of land and infrastructure in a way that keeps costs reasonable and manageable. And while at the same time, we also don't want to lose what we have in terms of existing vitality and character in our existing built-up areas. So it's a policy set to help council make decisions and to help direct growth to appropriate areas. So the Module A, the bylaw also includes a 10% aspirational strategic intensification target, which is a helpful way to think about directing growth to these built-up areas that is appropriate. So what that means essentially is that at least some of all new residential development units should be provided in a way that keeps the town in a good fiscal position. It protects agricultural lands and operations and realizes a better mix of land uses that creates great spaces and places in Strathmore without sort of sacrificing that vitality and character that I was talking about. Third area to highlight, fiscal sustainability and economic development. This is related in a way to the strategic intensification idea, but it goes much further. So Module A includes a strengthened set of fiscal sustainability and economic development policies that goes much further than our current MDP does. And really this, you could look at it one way to say it really comes down to being efficient with our infrastructure and the decisions we make, how it's paid for and how it's funded, and being mindful of aligning our decisions with budgets, budgetary impacts, and to make sure that Strathmore remains fiscally sustainable over the longer term. So it's a set of policies that can assist council with making decisions in that regard. And then with all this comes a balancing act. So economic development is something that we all need and want, and with that in mind, you also want to be able to encourage and attract commercial and industrial development in Strathmore, especially those scenarios that help strengthen local employment positions for residents and businesses. And then just quickly, so what would be next here? We're taking any feedback that we receive during this period back to the drawing board, make final refinements and tweaks to the amending bylaw that's attached. Even reading it back today, all 67 pages, I noted a couple typos here and there. So we're back there making refinements anyways, and we wanted to garner feedback from the committee, and we would work all of that into the bylaw, and then it would proceed to council, where it would follow regular bylaw adoption processes under the MGA that you're familiar with. And while this is all happening too, I want to highlight that we're continuing to work on future modules. So the momentum sort of continues in the right direction with respect to the overall MDP review process. The report outlines some of this, and it provides a roadmap of what policy topic areas are sort of next on the radar for us. And if there's any questions around those topic areas, I could answer those as well. And then just to close, we're happy to take any questions if the committee has any comments, thoughts, questions tonight. Really, like I said, tonight is all about hearing from the committee with respect to ideas and feedback on the module. And otherwise, we thank you for giving us the time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn, and I think there will be some questions. So first up is Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Glenn, and your team for all the work you've put into this. This is 67 pages of really detailed stuff, and it's been great to read through. The first question I have, and then I'll let other folks chime in. What's the timeline that you're looking for approval on Module A here? I assume we'll need to do a public hearing for it and all of that. Is that correct?
That's correct. The next step through the chair would be for the bylaw to be sort of polished and then proceed to council for first reading, and then there would be a public hearing, and then second and third readings, just like every other normal planning bylaw that would appear at council. So that part is normal. In terms of time frame, the bylaw itself, I would say, is really polished. The work that's been done is extensive. So we would require some time to make the refinements that we're already making, and then also to incorporate any feedback that we received tonight. But I think the goal would be to take it forward to council as soon as possible, really. It's a bylaw that's ready, and it's sort of in final polish mode, if you will, right now.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll let other councilors chime in with questions.
Okay, looks like it's just me then. I'll just start with a compliment. I really like and I really saw evidence of our administration meeting our strategic plan in this MDP. The focus on growth management, fiscal sustainability, economic development was really apparent. But I also thought it was apparent that the admin was looking at community connection and safe streets and just trying to keep what I keep calling, much to the rest of council's chagrin, what I keep calling small town charm, and trying to do that balancing act. So I really appreciated all the efforts that I saw in there. I do have a few questions. The employment area was something that was totally new to me. I found it really interesting. Glenn, would you mind, or CAO mind, giving a bit of a summary for the people at home on what maybe the goals are of the employment area and maybe some of the strategies that admin is suggesting to make that a reality?
So, are you, just before I answer that, are you referring to the employment areas policy or the actual economic development policy set as well?
Maybe you could help me here. So in here, I'm not sure if, so in map A toward the bottom, the orange area was all highlighted as employment area. I believe that overlapped with innovation hubs, which I find in section 217. But please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just very interested in how all that works together. The strategic business and innovation hub, I believe they were called employment areas on the map. Maybe help us out.
Sure. So to the committee, when we were building map A, which is the planned growth areas, the unplanned growth areas, the future growth areas, and the active growth areas, they largely represent community development, residential development with, you'll typically see like small scale commercial use, some mixed use, that's where we would like to go. But when you moved outside of those areas, the current MDP doesn't really draw any boundaries and call any areas of the town employment areas where you can attach like good economic development policy to those areas and good fiscal policy to those areas and sort of communicate outward what the policy is around sort of developing areas for employment land use as opposed to like more of the community area structure plans that council typically sees. It's not uncommon for municipalities to have these types of areas. So when we were building those growth areas, we do want to see employment growth in the town. And we do have this area of land south of the highway. It's pretty much operated as employment land in the past, but it's never had that name attached to it, and it's never had a strong policy basis behind it. So that's what we were out to create, was creating that boundary, identifying employment lands that are large pieces of land that could support important employment uses, and then supporting that and backstopping that with good economic development policy, how to attract those types of uses to the town and things like that. So that's new to this MDP, not unusual in other MDPs, but that was the thought process behind that. And then when we went further, we were looking at, what other municipalities are doing, what might be a good practice is. There's a real push between if you can attract, clusters to a municipality, that can be really healthy economic development. It can be really healthy employment development. So one of the ways of doing that is creating supportive policies around if you're a cluster or a certain business sector or industry, there are things from a policy perspective that we can do in the MDP to help attract those businesses and industries to the town. So that was the thought behind that too. You could sort of accentuate employment areas in a general sense by having these sort of specialized hubs and clusters as well as an option.
I see Director Dugdale's light on too, and if there was any additional comments on specifically the strategies or some examples of strategies, and especially in regards to the, I'm on the wrong page again, but I think it was called the Innovation Hub. But Director, did you have any comments?
Sure, through the chair, I think Mr. Ferguson's answered the question quite well, but what I might add more at a strategic level is when we were developing this, these growth management strategies, which are quite new for us in Strathmore, we wanted to kind of do a better job at managing residential growth, but not having any unintended consequences in terms of encouraging and allowing innovative growth for employment areas. So it was a bit of a fine line, so that's why I defined that other color on the map. And I think we've done obviously I'm biased, but I think we've done a pretty good job proposing that map that allows for that growth and innovation to happen in the employment areas and still keep an eye on residential growth and trying to balance those two. So just wanted to add that hopefully higher level thought.
If I could just add to that quickly, I just flipped to the strategic business and innovation hubs policy section. And as an example, if there was a certain sector, a certain industry that was interested in locating in Strathmore and they had sort of related or parallel industries and businesses that they needed to operate very well, there's a policy, a set of criteria at sort of the end of that section that talks about things like what could council do to help facilitate that? Well, you can look at things like expanding the range of permitted and discretionary uses within a hub, so expanding land use permissions that can help them set up those hubs so they're not constantly coming and applying for things. You can achieve that through, certain sectors or industries might have like the need for flexible lot areas, coverages, frontages, setbacks, reduced parking area and parking requirements. Maybe there's increased density requirements for certain types of industries or hubs or sectors. And then certain industries or sectors may also have, the need for certain types of accessory residential uses. So live-work dwelling units might be an example where you have a sector or industry locating in a hub like that, and they have the need for having dwelling units right on site for whatever reason, right? So live-work arrangements. So basically, it was giving council a tool that if we want to or we're going to attract certain types of employment uses, you have this as an additional tool to say, hey, we can help.
It's that kind of flexibility that really shows we're serious about economic development. I really appreciated seeing that. Or little details like, now, I got alarmed when I read this, but I went back and really focused on what I was reading. But like even little things like reducing the parking area in this specific innovation hub, or planning ahead for the potential of transportation eventually in the employment areas, or public transportation, I should say. Not that the MDP is bringing it in, just the idea that we're planning ahead for the eventuality. So lots of details, very oriented. Before I go on, does any other councillor have any questions? Okay, Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. Well presented. Thanks for all the information. Now, I know you'll operationalize that, and that's what you do. What does it look like to us as a council to make? We've got a map here. This is a visual. What does it look like to us to make the decision? I guess so. I'll revert back to the project matrix. What does it look like? Do you provide any insight on what it would look like to us from here's a document or here's a scoring matrix? I'm just making stuff up.
Yep. Through the chair, the way I would put that is the municipal development plan it's a guiding document, right? So it's a set of policies that help guide development. So it doesn't necessarily say permitted yes or no, hard yes or no, but it's a guiding document that gives council a set of policies that they can use to make decisions. So I think what that'll look like and feel like is, for instance, you may see a land use redesignation application come to council, whatever the request is in the land use bylaw. council will be able to look to the MDP to say, if we were to approve this, is it supported by the policy that's above it? So if we go back to that upside down pyramid, where we were at the green oval, it'll help council see and visualize and realize those policies when they're making their decisions underneath, if that makes sense.
Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you. Going back to kind of the employment area that we see in this new document, it's very much centered around our current kind of industrial land use here in town. But some of our highest employment areas are not in that area of town. We have a lot of commercial and retail employment along the highway. We're trying to encourage commercial development throughout different areas of town. We have our downtown, that's also, you know, hopefully an employment area. Could you talk a little bit, and maybe you've talked about it already, and I'm just not putting the pieces together, but why focus specifically on that area south of the highway as the employment area, when some of these things that we're trying to target in the employment area would be pretty beneficial for other areas where employment occurs around town? For example, you know, the future potential of being located along a transit route.
So through the chair, I think in the employment areas, we're talking about a different type or a more specific type of employment. You will find commercial development along the highway. You'll find small-scale commercial development throughout the municipality. Employment areas, really what we did there was we looked at large vacant parcels of land, which happened to be exactly where we drew that boundary. And these are valuable pieces of land that can be used to attract employment uses, industries, large users of land that require big pieces of land, right? So we're talking about light industrial, service industrial, commercial type uses that are propped up, or they provide economic development, economic growth, and provide advantages to the municipality that way. We're not talking in those areas about commercial retail, sort of like big box stores. That's not what the employment area is intended to achieve. It's intended to provide these large, valuable pieces of land and support it with policy that will attract larger employment use.
Okay.
So, and sorry, and I also want to add, it's also not to say that commercial development's not permitted anywhere else.
No.
So there'll still be policy to support the small scale commercial. Mixed use will be still encouraged throughout the municipality. You know, that'll still be a push and a thrust in the ASP work that we do with developers. But this is really just tied to the larger pieces of vacant land that are valuable from an economic development perspective.
If I could, through the chair, if I could just add a bit, the one thing to note as well is those areas in, I guess, yellow, I believe they're yellow in the map, right, Glenn, employment areas?
Orangey.
Orangey, okay.
Tangerine.
Yeah, I think those areas they're not built out yet either. I think that's why I want to recognize those areas. I mean, the areas you mentioned are, you know, obviously there could be some intensification, but they're largely built out for the downtown and some other commercial areas. So I think that's the difference as well.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
CAO Scoblin want to add something.
I mean, just to help a little bit, so like an employment area, we talked about commercial, industrial, and all that, but the way I look at it is, it's more, you know, your employment area is going to be more of a manufacturing, a logistics, where, you know, the business is contained, so to speak, until their product moves to market. Another way I look at it is, you know, your employment area is typically a business to business, whereas your commercial is a business to customer, right? The customer comes into the commercial area to buy a good or a service, whereas in the employment areas, it's manufacturing and their product is shipping out to customers elsewhere. So, you know, Fido is a good example of the type of business that would go into an employment area and not into our commercial retail kind of corridor, right? That's ultimately the objective, is to attract more of that FIDO-type business, and people leave their house in the morning in Strathmore and take their lunch with them and go and eat, work there and come at the end of their shift, or they choose to head to the, the commercial corridor along the highway to grab lunch. But it's, they're going to a place of employment, whereas the customers are coming to the area of business in the commercial, if that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I can understand absolutely, like, the purpose of it, and you've explained very well the intention behind it. I think, honestly, where I'm getting tripped up is the idea that it's an employment area. There are lots of places of employment in town. This is not the only employment area, and we're kind of talking in this document, in our planning document, as if this is where the jobs, all the jobs, the employment goes here.
No, I get what you're saying, and it might imply a differentiation, but employment lands, employment areas are actually kind of a common term. So St. Albert had employment lands. I believe Chestermere has employment area as well. Like, it's kind of it's almost like mixed use or another planning jargon. Employment lands or employment areas are not meant to insinuate that one type of employment is more important than the other, but it's that kind of destination where people go to work for the day. Whereas, yes, people work in the commercial, but the whole idea of the commercial is customers are coming to that area to buy a good or service.
Okay. Well, if it's a common term, then it's not a hill I'm going to die on, other than I disagree with the common term, I guess, but I won't fight you on it. Thank you for providing more context.
If I could just add one little thing, I guess part of the challenge we're having is that this is the modular approach may be giving you some challenges. We do have a future module that will address the downtown, so we're not leaving it out. It's just that the growth concept, we wanted to recognize employment areas within that. So when the whole picture comes together, hopefully it'll be very clear to all council. Thanks.
Mayor Fuel?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. And both of you gentlemen have done a good job answering questions and speaking to the MDP. I'm really excited by it. I like how even in the residential areas, you talk about local commercial, retail, and personal service uses. It's a mix of housing continually on our minds, a mix of usage within the communities. I can't help but think that the potential new development at the golf course area is going to be something really exciting and could fit very, very well into these things that are mentioned in the MDP. I also love the fact that it's going to give us as a council a lot of support in that we can reference it as far as our future decisions. And I just really, really like what I see. I also want to compliment you on the section on the history, both with Siksika and the CPR. It is the fabric of our town, and with Siksika being a big part of our economy, I really appreciated the history as far as being explained the way it was. So kudos to you, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to this coming to us for approval. Thank you.
Councillor Hyde?
Yeah, I was going to commend you on all of the work that you're doing here. The blend of the past to the present to looking to the future is imperative for good forward-thinking future planning. The employment areas, which whatever the term is, I grasp it for sure that that's an area that won't be considered for residential, or we're not looking at for residential development. Not going to have anybody building on top of a factory. But I just want to I'm so encouraged by this and excited by it, because as a person who at one time worked in Calgary and now am primarily employed here in Strathmore, I'm so confident that as we bring more industry, more commercial into this community, that sure, there's going to be some growth that comes along with it residentially, but I believe it's going to offer our residents that are here right now the opportunity to reconsider the way that they live, as far as being able to be employed in the town in which they live, which is the idea of live, work, and play. I was talking to a person just today, actually, as I was on my commute to work. I was on the line with somebody who's in Calgary, who has a 40-minute commute to her job, and she was so envious of my 3-minute commute from my door to my work. And just excellent work here. Keep it going, and I'm looking forward to continuing to watch this develop.
Okay, so my next question, I'm going to take a moment to sort of set the table with it. Densification is fiscally sustainable, which is a council priority. It's good for economic development, but I'm wondering if you guys could get more specific on how you've gone about trying to, I think your quote is, balance between protecting the character and vitality of town against redevelopment. I'm wondering if you could give me some specifics. And just one final thing to put on the table before I ask my question is I see in it, for example, I go to page 37 and I see section 2.1.2.4, and it gives me numbers. So it says something along the lines of we'll encourage and a minimum, no, sorry, we won't encourage, that we will have a minimum density of 25 residential units per net residential hectare, but the goal would be mixed use 40. So here's my question. What do those numbers mean practically? Is there any kind of like other neighborhoods in town I could compare it to, or other municipalities I could think about to sort of get my head around minimum 40 residential units per hectare and minimum 25 residential units, but the goal of 40. So I'm just looking for comparables. I'm looking for a sense of how that balances our character against our goals of fiscal responsibility. That was a really long question. Did you pick up what I was putting down?
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Yes, I think I did. If I missed anything, though, please follow up. To make things even more confusing, the planning profession has a lot of work to do, but our MDP is now in metric, which is units per hectare. I was trained in units per acre, and it's not as simple as thinking of an acre of land you can fit 5 or 6 houses on. It's viewed at the neighborhood scale. What can you fit in a quarter section? Most of our town is kind of in that 4, 5, 6 units per acre realm today, and a good future target, speaking in metric, would be in that 8 to 10 units per acre route. So it's not a dramatic intensification, but modern planning suggests things like a little bit narrower of a lot, potential basement suites. Too much of a low-density residential land use in an area structure plan will be kind of not the thing to do. A quarter section in our neighborhood might include townhomes, duplexes, semi-detached, a little apartment sector to bring the density of that neighborhood or quarter section up to modern planning standards. So our newer communities are in that 5, 6 units per acre range, and our kind of target is in that 8 to 10 units per acre range. Glenn here speaks in metrics, so there might be a little bit of conversion. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Can I clarify before Glenn tries?
Yeah.
So I think I heard you say currently most of the town of Strathmore has 8 to 10 units per hectare?
Most of the town right now is in that 4, 5, 6 units per acre.
So what would that work out then if I'm trying to compare apples to apples? So the MDP is in hectares, so.
That's a good question. You might need a calculator.
So the units per hectare that you're seeing in these growth areas, we're talking about greenfield development.
Yeah, so these are in the future growth areas.
Future growth areas and the active growth areas, yeah. So,
okay. So
just for comparison, so Chuck's numbers with 4 to 6 per acre is currently what most of Strathmore is at. The 25 would move us more into the 8 to 10 range per acre. So it is an increase over what you would see in Strathmore right now, but it's not a significant jump. I think it works out, I think it really moves from, I think it's from like about 18 to 20, now we're going up to 25.
Would we be able to just
per
get a
hectare.
calculator and check
Sure.
that? Because I want to just be able to compare apples to apples. So what would be like our current average? Given, of course, some of our average might be a little skewed because of those, a lot of downtown lots are quite huge, but I'm just trying to get a sense of what we are today and what our future goals are.
If I could, through the chair, if I could just add something while we're doing the math. What density is, it's a bit of a crude measure. What we're trying to do with density, though, is with our new neighborhoods, is encourage developers to provide more housing choices. As Manager Chuck noted, a lot of our current older communities are largely single detached homes. Moving forward into new developments, we want to have a situation where we have different housing choices for different families and different demographics. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have a radical increase in total density, but we want to make sure that we have more housing choices for people moving forward. And I did some math just while we were talking, so 4 units per acre is about 9 units per hectare. That's the math. So we want the measure in the new MDP amendments or proposed amendments is actually pushing us closer to 8 to 10 units per acre rather than 4 to 6 to 8, which it had been in the past. So that's just my thought.
I think it's important to note too, that's the average, right? Like that's what the planners have been talking about, is you'll have some single family probably at similar or maybe even a lower density within the neighborhood, but you'll have some townhomes, you may have some row homes, you'll have an apartment. Like, you know, the density of your apartment is gonna be, I don't know, anywhere from 60 to 80 dwelling units, whereas the homes are gonna be at 4 to 5 to 6, but overall, that neighborhood will be in that range that we're talking about. So you gotta remember, it's not gonna be uniform, one type of housing as the planners are talking about. So you'll have some areas of a lower density, you'll have some areas of a higher density, you'll have some areas of a medium density, and it'll all come out with that overall density for that neighborhood.
So just to put some numbers to that, then currently Strathmore, you'll probably find up to 15 units per hectare, which is about the 6 acres or 6 units per acre.
So sorry, so today it's closer to about,
15 units per hectare is probably the higher end today in Strathmore.
so anywhere from 10 to 15 units per hectare or 9 to 15 units per hectare kind of thing?
Yeah, 15 being the very upper limit for Strathmore right now. But it's probably most development, most large areas like using the description that CEO Scobel gave, you're going to find anywhere from 10 to 15 units per hectare, which is 4 to 6 units per acre. Module A, the bylaw is suggesting that for new areas, greenfield development across the entirety of a plan area, you would see a minimum of 25 per net residential hectare, which is about 10 per acre. So it's a shift from 15 to 25, which is a shift from 6 per acre to 10 per acre.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding this. I'm hearing quite an extraordinary shift in, you're using the word intensification, I'm using the word densification. So today, the town on average is anywhere from 9, would be sort of normal, up to higher density is 15. But the MDP is proposing a minimum of 25 units per hectare, and with a goal of 40 units per hectare.
So the 40 units per hectare is referring to mixed-use nodes. So if we want to have mixed use in new area structure plans, new future growth areas, the density would need to be higher. So we're talking about specific points within the larger area. Activity nodes where you find a mix of uses, you would need to provide for higher densities there than the balance of the land, which would be lower at 25. So that 40 you wouldn't see across the entirety of an area structure plan. That's not the suggestion, it's just for certain node points. focal points within an area structure plan, you would see densities in or around that potentially.
Right, but our minimum
Would be
is
25.
25. Now, I know what I understand, again, the balance is important because a municipality needs to be a certain level of densification if we're going to be fiscally sustainable and manage our growth. But what I'm picturing when I hear 25 units per hectare is like, when I drive past new developments on my way into Calgary, is just like row upon row upon row of these townhouses and apartments. But then I'm hearing like that's the minimum is 25 units.
And that's across
That's not our goal. That's our minimum now.
That's the minimum, and that would be across the entire plan area, and that would be all different types of development. The sum of all that development would equal that 25.
But our minimum goal is to double our density in the new neighborhoods. That's our minimum goal, is to double our density
In new growth
new
areas,
neighborhoods.
In new growth areas, yeah.
Okay.
Now, when we talk about intensification, that's why the strategic intensification policies are there, because you're not necessarily going to take and find built-up areas that are appropriate to support that type of density, right? And it's a different type of density you're talking about at that point, because you're talking about infilling, you're talking about underutilized lots, right? So adding density. It doesn't exactly compare apples to apples type thing there. So the idea with providing the strategic intensification tools is that you can set that 25 and that 40 number aside, and you can use a set of criteria to say, in this existing built-up area, does it sort of hit the marks of being appropriate development? So vitality and character is protected. It's appropriate to add some density, maybe not at the level that you would see in a greenfield area, but you can go almost site by site and use that policy set to say appropriate, yes or no. So it's a useful tool for council to assess the appropriateness of development in built-up areas. That's strategic intensification. Is it good planning, yes or no?
Now, I have further questions on this, but I'm just wondering if Councillor Langmaid is about this
It is
issue?
about this
Okay, I'll let Councillor Langmaid go.
Thank you. I just want to, it's maybe less of a question and more me parroting back what I've heard to make sure that I understand. So when we're talking about 25 units per hectare, we are not dropping a square hectare on the map and going, there must be 25 units here. We're looking at an entire, say, at the ASP level. We're looking at that entire ASP, all of the hectares in that, because the hectare is not huge. We're looking at kind of a massive area. So I'll use my neighborhood as an example of Cambridge Glen, because your name is Glen and I live in Glen. That is not a terribly dense neighborhood. However, if for some reason an apartment building popped up in the middle of Cambridge Glen, and I'm not saying we would do this, but I'm just using it as an example, one apartment building in the middle of that neighborhood would totally increase the units per hectare without changing anything else around that apartment building. So you could increase that density of the entire neighborhood with one multi-unit housing.
And because, through the chair, because we're talking in this scenario about adding development within an existing built-up area,
I'm not necessarily talking about adding it to an
assess.
existing area. I'm
Yeah.
I'm trying to use one as,
No,
pretend you were rebuilding Cambridge Glen in a new area and you popped,
okay, so-
and you added in the plan, you added an apartment building to it. If you were
I
rebuilding
follow
it
now.
completely.
Okay, so if we think back to map A that was on the screen, I was hoping we could maybe get it back up. If we were to have someone walk in tomorrow in an unplanned growth area, so that was the gray areas in the map, very large piece of land, and they wanted to develop, and they said, what type of densities are we permitted? We would say across that entire area, 25 units per hectare is the minimum, but how you distribute that, it can be done, some apartment buildings, some townhouses, some singles, however you want to distribute that mix. When we calculate all of that net residential development, it's 25 minimum. So it won't always look, so that one site example you gave, the density on the site will be higher, much higher.
So can
And
I,
across the site, lower.
Can I use a very silly example to make sure I understand? So we have, say, an entire quarter section that's going to be a new neighborhood. The target for a new neighborhood is 25 units per hectare. If that developer put a 20-story apartment building smack dab in the middle of that quarter section, and then one single detached family home over in the corner, and then all of that equaled out to be 25 units per hectare, that, in theory, would meet it. I'm not saying that would ever be built. I'm just using it as an example so that I can make sure I understand that it's for the entire area. It's not.
Right, so, correct, so through the chair, when we use that extreme example, you're 100% correct. However, I would add on to that and say, there's gonna be enough policy in the balance of the MDP to say, that's not appropriate development, right?
No,
So-
and I'm not at
so
all suggesting it would be.
It's a tool, density is a tool, right? But we're really gonna have to use the balance of the policies in the MDP to assess development like that. I don't think there would be a scenario where we would be able to support something like that, but you're right, if you were to just extract that policy and say that's what it says, you could come up with scenarios where it works like that, but we would have to then use, the balance of the document and say that's not good land use planning.
Right. So it's not that every new community in Strathmore is going to look like tiny little skinny homes right
No,
next
not
to
at
each
all.
other, tick, 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 down the road. We can still we'll still be able to have single-family detached homes with a nice yard, but down the street, there will probably be some townhomes, and around the corner, there might be a small apartment building.
Yeah. In fact, as part of, it's just a quick sort of story about preparing the document. As part of this, we went through some exercises where we said, like, what would that number look like if I had a piece of land that was this big? And by the way, don't include anything that's taller than 3 stories. We had it could distribute that density in certain ways, and it could show you what 25 would look like. You could change the scenario and say, well, now I want a 6-story building as the centerpiece, and you could see how the units would all shift around again, right? So it's just a guiding number for sort of the overall density that we would see. It's not dictating what the look and the feel of an area would necessarily be, right?
Okay. I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. Thank you very much.
CAO?
Maybe just another way to look at it is if we use Cambridge Glen, let's say it's brand new and it's being built as we speak, and the roads are the exact same as they are now with the houses. If Sagewood Complex was apartments and you combine those apartments, like it's not an institutional seniors care, it was private apartments like is being built at Park Lane or wherever. If you took the density of all the existing houses in Cambridge being built the way they are and Sagewood was a private apartment, you'd probably be pretty close to the density that we're talking about.
Thank you. That's what I think Councillor Langmaid's trying to say. That's what I'm trying to visualize. So when I'm visualizing driving into Calgary and it's row upon row upon row, that's far exceeding 25 residential units. That's probably exceeding 40 residential units. Tell me that's exceeding 100 residential units and I'll feel better. Okay, I have a more specific question then. So in last term, a couple of ASPs we worked on on council would be West Creek's ASP and Edgefield's Phase 2 ASP are ones that are kind of fresh in my mind. I'm putting you on the spot here, but I'm wondering if there'd be any way to find out what would be the densities of those so I can kind of picture what we're talking about.
So on the spot, 5 to 6 per acre
was West Creek?
Would be those West Creek. So, and what I would say to that is, without this type of policy supporting it, there was really no policy basis for asking for more, right? Like we were already.
Well, I'm not suggesting we go back and change those.
No, but
I'm just trying to picture then, so those to me even looked a little bit higher density. Some of the housing, especially along the main road, were quite close together. And that's still only 5 or 6 units per hectare?
Per acre.
Yeah, which is
Thank you, Council, and I think we'll maybe we'll include the imperial and metric measurements in the bylaw for next time. But yeah, the Edgefield and Lakewood communities are in that 5 to 6 units per acre. They were adopted a long time ago where, you know, the predominant land use was R1 for that entire area. And we're basically looking to modernize that planning practice to, in that entire area, include R1, of course, but different things like apartments to bring that overall density up for the area. But the latest amendments, our newest communities are lower than our aspirational target.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing in this MDP is that the recommendation from our administration is we fundamentally change the density of the future developments in this town. That's what I'm hearing is if today we are at 9 to 15 units per hectare, and we're looking at a minimum of 25 units per hectare with a goal of 40, that is a massive change. I'm not even giving my opinion on this. I'm just digesting the information. Here's my next question. How is this comparable to MDPs that we see coming out of other mid-sized cities? That's my question.
So to the committee, it's comparable.
Sorry, just specifically in relation to the density.
Specifically to the committee, with respect to the density, it's similar to what you would find in similar sized municipalities. It's also in line with municipalities in close proximity to Strathmore. I would say in general, over the last, maybe if I said decade, you've seen a move towards these numbers elsewhere.
Well, it certainly will help keep the housing more attainable. CAO?
And maybe the planners can comment on this. I'm going to talk about the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board before it was dissolved, but the standard there was minimum 36 dwelling units per hectare. So we're talking 25 to 40. So our low end is much lower than that. And in some areas we could see it comparable. So was it a similar standard in Calgary, Jamie, when it was up and running?
Through the chair, I believe so. Manager Proctor could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think CMRB before it was dissolved, I think they were looking at minimum 12, weren't they, per acre?
Yes, they had a range. I was directly involved in the CMRB when it was a thing. This is the same target that plan, similar target that plan aspired to have all communities around Calgary. There's multiple members in that committee, similar to the EMRB.
Sorry, and also, if I may, Deputy Mayor, when we talk about 25 to 40, I think it's important to be clear that it's 25 residential dwelling units in a greenfield setting per net residential hectare, and then in certain parts of a large area structure plan area, you could see that's where you would see the increase to 40. So you would never, there wouldn't be a situation where we would say a mixed use node is the entire plan area. So it's 40 across all of that gray area in the upper left-hand corner of the municipality. You would maybe see points in that area where it's 40, and the balance would be 25. So it's not a range, 25 to 40. It's 25 across the board, but in certain parts of that plan where you want to see mixed use, so maybe along a collector or an arterial intersection, you would see more density there than you would across the balance of the property.
Okay, so maybe I'm finally understanding you with the 40. Is the target of 40 then basically saying that would actually be closer to our high end then? You're saying that there would be nodes within these that we would say to our developers, we would like to see a higher end sort of density in that spot? Like that's how you would sort of guide them? You're not saying you're looking for an overall target of 40 units?
Absolutely not. So I'm looking at, when I look at the Map A planned growth area, and I'm again using the upper left-hand corner, the square there beside the yellow square. As an example, you might want to encourage the 40 unit per hectare as a mixed use node at the intersection of Stampede Drive and, well, maybe along parts of Stampede Drive where you have collector roads coming out to the main road. You might want to say like one of those points is a mixed use node where we'll see up to 40. But everything else in behind that, 25.
And then they get to count that 40 toward their average of 25. So you've encouraged them to put a node along a heavy, or a route where we've already got an existing traffic sort of plan. And then you're saying to them that will help you balance your,
could,
to get
yes.
your average to 25 units per residential. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Exactly.
So it's not that you're encouraging them to get to 40.
No,
You're
we're
telling them it's a minimum of 25 and showing them how to get there by having nodes that are at 40.
Correct. That's one way of doing it, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to encourage, well, I mean, we don't have the benefit of a plan in front of us, but I can't imagine a scenario where you'd want to see, 40 in the back of a development and 20 along the arterial, right? We would encourage the opposite. So it's set up that way to do exactly almost what you said, which is
Director
help
Dugdale?
direct development.
Sure. So just to perhaps try to simplify it, 40 is the upper limit. That's the top limit. Typically, the challenge we have with developers is the minimum, quite frankly, more recently, is that bottom limit. We don't see too many developers, at least I haven't seen in my time, where developers on a whole plan area want to say, we want to go above the density, because obviously there's market realities they need to achieve as well.
Yeah, so I have two more questions unless someone else on council. Okay, it's just, I understand I'm monopolizing the time here, but I think this is an incredibly important conversation to have before we go ahead with our first reading. It's giving everybody a chance to digest where we're at here. So the last two developments that I can think of, or the last two ASPs that I can think of, they were looking at significantly lower units per hectare, which tells me that our developers are desiring lower units per hectare, which tells me that the market is still at the point where they feel they can make their best buck by providing low density housing in Strathmore. And so by doing this and going up with this enormous increase in density, what does that do for developers, and what kind of interest is there in developers, and who are we thinking we're going to attract in developers? Could you just give me a sense of what developers are saying, what you're hearing, what are your thoughts?
So to the committee, I would say we're often looking at this a little bit different than developers. So we're looking at this from a good land use planning perspective and utilizing infrastructure efficiently and how we pay for things and how we remain as a municipality fiscally sustainable over the long run, right? That may not necessarily resonate with a developer, right? Because yes, there's a market. They also know what they can get in, build, to get out quickly, right? They're running a business, and their planning will often find itself pushing up against that. So what is good land use planning versus the business side for a developer, right? So this is trying to strike that balance between what is good land use planning, what helps the municipality be fiscally sustainable, and we're using that. This provides a policy basis to help push developers for providing that type of development.
Director Dugdale?
And I guess I just, through the chair, I'd just like to reiterate what I mentioned earlier. The density is one tool to achieve housing variety, which also we believe over time achieves housing affordability, right? If we focus on just ensuring developers make a good buck, that won't necessarily achieve housing affordability for Strathmore.
Okay, my final question is probably one you hoped I would ask all night. So far I've been along the lines of, if we're talking about balancing fiscal sustainability for our town with the sort of the character, my questions have been along the lines of maintaining the character. So I'll finish off one that is more maybe along the lines of what our administration wants me to ask. And I just want to be very clear. Well, first of all, Glenn, thank you. I've grilled you tonight, but this one is equally important for anyone watching at home to get their heads around. It is important that we are being fiscally responsible. It is important that we are building new neighborhoods that our town can afford to build. So here is my final question. Help me and the people at home understand why, and the people at home being existing taxpayers, help me and existing taxpayers understand, why do we want higher density in the new neighborhoods? Why do the residents who are currently living here and currently paying taxes here actually want to see a higher density on the perimeter of our town in those future areas of growth? How does that make our town stronger? How does that make us more fiscally sustainable?
Well, that's, through the chair, that's a big question. And I could probably start to answer it, and I think Glenn and perhaps CEO Scoble could probably add to it. I already mentioned affordability. The other simple piece is, more homes on less pipe is more affordable for the town. But I think from an economic development perspective as well, is if we continue to build the way we have in the past, we have a situation where we don't have housing for people who want to work in Strathmore and support the current businesses we already have. So those are two elements. But again, there's probably several that don't come to the top of mind. Perhaps other staff can help me.
Well, I'll just build on the pipe example there. So say on a block, you have 8 to 10 houses, right? So there's 10 houses on that water line, that sewer line. So that's, there's a cost to that. If you've got all duplexes on that street, it's now 20 units that are sharing that cost. So it makes it both affordable for the buyer, but it makes the ongoing operations and maintenance costs cheaper for everybody because more people are sharing that pipe. So I'll talk about one community that I'm aware of, and I won't name, but I was quite involved in. It involves rural servicing versus city servicing. But to give you an example, a residential lot in those days for servicing cost $45,000 for a standard single-family home lot. Country residential servicing was $450,000, anywhere from $250,000 to $450,000 per lot. Because again, there's one home occupying what 8 to 10 homes would cost, right? And so that's where you get those economies of scale, both for the new home buyer, but also the town of Strathmore takes on those pipes when the developers built them, and after the warranty period's up, they become ours, and the operation and maintenance of those pipes is now the responsibility of all taxpayers. So if we've got more people sharing a given length of pipe, that's where we see efficiencies in, because we have to maintain those, we have to eventually replace them. It's the same with the roads, right? There's more people sharing the same length of a road, so we all have a lower unit cost in the long-term operations and maintenance of that infrastructure.
Okay, I'll go.
I don't mean to butt in here, but for council and for the people at home too, one thing with this density increase is we'll increase the type of housing, that variety. Hey, we're susceptible to being top heavy in one kind of land use. That density will help us out provide townhomes, apartments, different styles of housing, a more resilient market, less susceptible to, like a top heavy single detached. We'll have different options for people, a more resilient community.
So just to bring all of that together, what I would say is I think it's important that the MDP review be viewed as a document as a whole. Density is certainly one component that you'll find typically in MDP, but you're also going to find policies that help support decision-making from councils all throughout. So I think when you take an MDP and what that document is meant to do, it's a guiding policy document. It helps council make decisions. It helps council manage the costs of growth that we've heard about just now. And to not just focus on necessarily the density numbers. I know that's a very important part of it. But when you really step back and you view the document as a whole, what we're trying to do is give council and give residents and give businesses sort of a snapshot, a paramount document that helps guide all types of development, all types of growth in a manner that's appropriate for those that are living here now and those that will live here in the future. And there are real costs associated with growth, and this document is meant to give council that supporting policy structure to make decisions.
Okay, so I've heard you say there are costs associated with growth. I couldn't agree more. And it's real costs. And I know it's an ongoing debate in every municipality, and it always will be. We never want to be in a situation. Look, I'm a selfish voter. I don't want to be in a situation where my taxes are being used to subsidize new growth in Strathmore. And I think what this MDP is doing is creating a situation where that's not happening. The current people in Strathmore are not going to have to pay to maintain and grow all the new developments. That's the situation I'm hoping for. What I would really like from our administration is when this comes before us next time, if there could be a portion of the presentation that answers this question: why is this good for the existing taxpayers? Because I'm actually think it is. I just am not, and I understand, like Director Dugdale's like, we could spend all night talking about that. But even just a 5-minute, 10-minute sort of like, okay, to the existing taxpayers, you need to understand, we've all grown accustomed to a certain level of services, to our sidewalks being finished a certain way, and our stormwater, and everything that makes this town so great. But by growing in this new way, according to this municipal development plan, why is it good for us? Why is it an advantage to us?
Yeah, I think the way to frame it is, I think what administration has presented is a balance. So on one end of the continuum, you've got single-family houses on a quarter-acre lot. On the other end of the continuum, you've got high-density, arguably what some would call blanket rezoning. And we're trying to find that spot somewhere in between there that strikes a balance. I think it's also important, and I think we should probably note it, land is, I think any of us know that land is appreciating at a significantly higher rate than inflation. So we have become land constrained in Alberta now. It was something we didn't worry about in the past, but we are becoming land constrained now. And that's one of the major impediments. I had a graph done in the last place I worked that showed inflation was like this and land costs were going up like this, right? So land is a real costly item now. I mean, I've owned land in other places, and I looked at land down here when I came down here. The unit cost of land here is about 6 to 7 times higher than what I sold rural land for up north. So land is a premium here.
And so just to further flesh that out, so I see you writing that down. It would be really helpful for myself and for people at home. In addition to that, I would like to see some examples so that people can picture what we're talking about. So what would density, what does that look like if we've got the row upon row of apartment buildings? What kind of density is that compared to what our administration is proposing, which is a much more reasonable balance? But I do think a question I will be asking in the future is there any way to get a cost-benefit analysis on this when it comes to, if you're bringing in presumably lower income earners and presumably people that are going into attainable housing, is there any increase in cost to a municipality then when it comes to serving people who are living in that income bracket? Is there an increase in cost when it comes to security and fire and social services? Like, those will be two questions that I'm really looking at as we move forward on this module in the MDP. I'll take an answer, and then Mayor Fuel's up next.
Through the chair, just a comment, and I guess a reminder, the MDP is a macro level document. The question you asked about what would the cost of servicing be on a built-out neighborhood with a certain density, I think would be very challenging and very resource intensive to develop. It would also involve a great deal of assumptions, I think. We can take that away and see what we can do, but I'm not sure if it'll satisfy what you're looking for, just at this level of a macro document.
Mayor Fuel?
Yeah, thank you. I've been really intently listening, and Deputy Mayor, absolutely share some of your reservations and questions, and I just want to make sure that I look to the west of us to Chestermere, and I see all those units that go up, and I do have worry that I don't want us to go down too far that road. Like Counselor, sorry, I always call you Counselor, CAO Scoble. Like CAO Scoble was saying, we're looking for that balance so that we are increasing density, and we're trying to find a way for people to get into housing, but we also don't want to go too far in one way. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around this density of these numbers that are being mentioned tonight. So I guess all I'm saying is I'm a little worried, but I understand why we're looking at this kind of an approach in the MDP. So I'll just leave it at that, and hope to get more information as we go forward. Thank you.
Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have one question related to kind of this conversation, and then I'm going to just completely 180 on you to something completely different. Would it be possible at some point before this comes back to council, Glenn, you were talking about there was a program or something you were doing where you were inputting the numbers and it was kind of showing you an example of what that neighborhood might look like at a certain density. Would it be possible to generate a few realistic scenarios so that we could have a visual to see like what would that neighborhood look like at that density?
So, through the chair, I think the short answer is yes, we could provide some examples. One of the notes that I made while Deputy Mayor was speaking was, we can explore the inclusion of maybe some figures or some graphics in the MDP that help visualize some of those numbers. The work that I was referring to was done very crudely. I wouldn't want to put it in any type of council-adopted document.
But what if it was just part of a presentation that you
That's
had
what I'm
up?
saying. I made a note that if we can bring something back as part of that process that helps council and wrap their heads around it, and everyone wrap their heads around it, then I think that's something that we should do. So definitely, I made a note that we'll look into what we can do there.
Thank you. Yeah,
sure.
I think that would be really helpful. Not to clarify, I wasn't suggesting that we include it within the statutory
No,
document
it's a
because I don't
thought
want
though,
to.
right?
I don't
Like
want to tie anyone's hands, but it would be helpful for me to see a visual, and for when I'm talking to people in the community to go, okay, well, this is kind of what that would look like. It's not a 20-story apartment building in the middle of a quarter section.
Right. So I mean, we can definitely look into that and bring something back like that. There are a few sort of sources, documents that I'm thinking of in my head that might help, even if we're able to provide some like resources in terms of web links to documents that help explain exactly what we're talking about. And if anything was to be included in the MDP document, it would be very conceptual.
Yeah.
To just maybe, it could be a sidebar that helps explain like what is density, what is net residential hectare. You see those in other MDPs.
Yeah.
But I did make a note of that, and we can certainly try and address that.
Thank you. I would find that very helpful. Yep. All right. Are you ready to flip 180 to something completely different?
Absolutely.
I am looking at Map B, land use concept.
Map B.
This is on page
Okay.
62 of 67 of the bylaw. I don't know what it is in our agenda package. I'm sorry for everyone else.
Should be page
It's also Schedule
117.
D.
Yep.
So Schedule D, Map B, land use concept. We're getting there. Oh, I think other way. A little more, one map down.
117. Yep, right there.
There we go, right there. I am looking at the southeast corner here, in that big quarter section. Are we intending that to be residential? I've always kind of understood that there is no residential south of the highway, and I'm seeing residential south of the highway, and I'm wondering if we've kind of changed our approach on that.
So through the Deputy Mayor, absolutely not. So the story on this one is actually, to me, fairly interesting. Map B is actually just a true like transcription of the old map into this new style. In the next module, we are looking at this map almost property by property, and there will be changes
Okay.
to it. Map B is literally just what Map B is today, you know, as
Copy
prepared in
paste.
2014 or whatever it was, brought into today's style and update, and that's it. The next module will look at that, and it is a peculiarity in the MDP that that is sitting there in that designation.
Okay, perfect, thank you. That worried me a little bit, in knowing that that is not the final map. It will be changed.
It's
to say-
actually, for a planner, it's going to be one of the more interesting things we'll do is, you know, the next module, taking this map and going property by property, make sure that the designation's correct. And it's the biggest one, like, it shows up on the map very clearly, but already from looking at it, like, I know there's probably at least a dozen little peculiarities that have persisted through time for whatever reason, right? So.
And then my final question, just on the topic of maps. We do have an annexation in the works that's going through the land use folks with the province. Does that timeline of that potential annexation approval, will we have that before we update all the maps? We hope so.
Right,
Ideally, yes.
And through the deputy mayor, I'm glad this comes up, because one of the things we did in the implementation section was we included some policy support around making updates to maps that are technical, right, in nature. So when and if that time comes, we would be able to make the change. It wouldn't necessarily trigger like an MDPA where you have to have like a public hearing or anything like that. There is in the implementation section there certain scenarios and situations where we would just be able to make like typographical mapping updates, things like that. So
Perfect,
Yep.
thank you very much. Those were all my questions.
Counselor Hyde?
Yeah, swinging over to a totally different section, 2.1.8.56789. It's just a wording question. It's in regards to the economic areas, and you guys use the word ensure, promote, encourage. Is used repetitively, of course. I'm curious why, in regards to the provision of sidewalks, pathways, trails, and roads, or new open space corridors, we just use the words encourage instead of ensuring, because we have a part of our down in our industrial zone south of the highway there are no trails or sidewalks or anything, which makes getting around those areas a bit of a challenge for anybody who's walking or bicycling. Is there a reason we wouldn't use the words ensure instead of just encourage to make sure that they're connected to the rest of the town?
sure. Through the deputy mayor, just a question of clarification. Are we talking about 2.1.8.6?
2.1.8.6
Okay.
and 2.1.8.8.
Okay. So in those, one of the things you'll find throughout the document is you're 100% correct. There's repetition in those types of words: will, should, require, may. The wording there was used to ensure that there's flexibility in how we develop our employment areas. Certainly, if council wanted to, that word could be switched to require. If it's an absolute must when developing employment areas, that from a policy perspective, council will require it. But where we were going with that as a sort of a planning department is when you're planning these big employment areas, you're going to need some flexibility around how you promote and how you develop those areas. So the word is encourage, which means for us, for every type of development in an employment area, we're going to be encouraging them, right? But as a matter of policy, we're not going to be requiring it.
If I could just add to that through the chair, you noted the existing industrial area, and certainly we have heard some individuals challenged with the pedestrian networks down there, or lack thereof. What we need to keep in mind is those areas were developed when I would argue that we didn't have even urban standard roads or streets, whereas now if that were developed tomorrow, for example, our engineering standards would take care of that. I wouldn't guarantee there'd be sidewalks everywhere, but there would be more of them. So That's kind of how some of our standards will also work with an MDP together. And as Glenn, Mr. Ferguson noted, we didn't want to, again, have unintended consequences. For example, we got, some fantastic new employment area, and one of the things was, well, we need to do something different for the pedestrian networks. We wouldn't want that to be kind of something that held it back. We'd have to come to council with an amendment or something like that, or we'd have to go against your policy. So I think that's kind of why we wanted to keep it flexible. But I would suggest that in most cases, there would be an urban cross-section of streets that would include some sidewalks in most developments. Thanks.
And if I could add to that too, when we go back to that pyramid, so this is a guiding policy document, the MDP. When you drop down to like an area structure plan, let's say there was an area structure plan for a big piece of employment land, that might be a more appropriate place to put a policy that it's required. So for this business area, this business park, this employment development, it's required. You could even go further down the pyramid and say, you don't even need it there, let's do it in the zoning bylaw, like the land use bylaw, right? You could have development standards relating to the provision of sidewalks. So I think part of the answer is the more appropriate place to require that is probably beneath, but you've got this policy supporting it above that we're going to push for it. We're going to encourage it.
Any other comments from council? There's a couple of quiet, stoic members tonight. So just in conclusion from me then is I don't know what's best. I know that my administration is working really hard to find the balance between keeping our character and our vitality with making sure that we're economically sustainable for our existing taxpayers. And I do know that next time you guys come forward to present, I'm going to really push on the question, because I believe it's true, by the way. I'm going to really push on the question is, why is this increased densification good for the existing taxpayers? So again, I'm a very selfish taxpayer. I'm a selfish voter. I want to know why it's good for me. And I think there's lots of reasons why it's good for me to have the future growth areas more dense. And I also would like to know what it looks like. So if there could be some rudimentary drawings, just giving me a sense of what 25 units to 40 units might look like, I would really appreciate that. Any final thoughts from the rest of council? Councillor Brown?
Yes, I'd like to say, sometimes it's better to listen when all the right questions are being asked. Actually, I think a lot of what was discussed here, it was better just to stay out of the way and let the councillors ask them. And I'm very satisfied with the dialogue that's gone on. It's been a tough night for you. I got to say, it's a lot of tough questions. But I do say that sometimes it's just better just to pay attention. And I don't think there's much left unturned in here other than perhaps the legalese of using encourage versus ensure. We can look at that again, and when we do first reading, of course, we can sort of make some tweaks. And I hope that when we do some review on our own free time as well, that we can propose through emails or dialogue changes that might be considered for that first reading. So unfortunately, we just can't ask everything in the first go, but really good dialogue, I have to say, really good. Thank you.
All right, to Glenn, Jamie, and your team, I think the work you've put into this. Oh, Mayor Fuel.
Thank you. Mine's just a final comment. I don't mean to insult anyone with my reservations that I have. I think I come from a layperson's point of view, so I'm trying to wrap my head around the density, and so that's the only reason why I expressed any reservations. And I'm looking ahead to what the town, the future city would become, and just needing to wrap my head around about what this will look like. So I'm going to appreciate further meetings or further when this comes to us again. So thank you very much, everybody.
All right, I'll start again. Glenn, Jamie, to the team, like the work you've put into this is very apparent to me. Glenn, I have to say your joy for it is infectious. I was getting excited just like you. Oh, and Chuck, of course, in the background. And I really appreciate it. There was a lot to like about this MDP, and we just grilled you on those, like trying to get more information on those small number of things. So very much appreciated. Thank you. I have lost my skeleton minutes though. Oh, here they are. Thank you, Councillor Langmaid. This moves us then to item 7.4, signing authority policy. Leanna, are you still with us?
I am still with you.
All right, welcome.
I'm hoping that this is not as heavy of a topic for you guys tonight. The signing authority policy is very important to not only council administration, but also for the community. It ensures that we are being fiscally responsible, not only with money, but even how we make decisions and who's got the authority to do certain items within the town. So as I started with saying, this is vital that proper oversight is maintained of every contract and every expenditure that town of Strathmore, regardless of the scope or the value. This also is to support accountability to the community. The authorization of financial and non-financial transactions should be performed in accordance with the agreed terms. This includes, but is not limited to, bylaws, minutes, checks, contracts, and other agreements. The purpose of the signing authority policy is to outline who at the town of Strathmore may sign or authorize financial transactions, agreements, and other municipal documents. It provides clarity of roles and responsibilities within the town, ensuring proper governance is maintained while allowing for division and delegation of work. As you see on the screen, the town administration has gone through all of the town departments, has provided this to the leadership team, and after multiple reviews of this, this is what administration's recommendation is to council. We have the support of our CAO Scoble on this, and this supports everything that he does for you. So as you see, we have the purchase agreements approved within budget and within $5,000. We've got approved within the budget and 25,000. And this all kind of goes back into our procurement policy. Then we have new purchase of agreements. This is checks. One of the big things with the checks is we want to be more modern and using signatures printed onto our checks. And of course, this allows us to do this, where previously administration couldn't do this. And we are manually signing checks once a month and having 3 levels of approvals of pushing any money out of the bank. Not saying that we're not going to be fiscally responsible. We are still going to have our oh my goodness, I'm just blanking here. It's
Checks and balances.
checks and balances. Yes, I am so sorry. But this gives from the top end right to the bottom end of who's authorized to sign anything on behalf of the community, where administration is here to support council. But this also allows council to have a document policy behind them that shows that we are fiscally responsible and we are paying attention to what we're doing. So as you see going farther down, you have your signing on development agreements for subdivisions, tax recovery documents, bylaws and minutes, checks or council policies, board and committee minutes, employment contracts, grant funding applications, intergovernmental agreements, and the authorization limit exception form, and other agreements, for example, sponsorship facility agreements, mutual aid agreements, without getting stalled within the bureaucratic process on running from desk A to B to C to ensure that we are signing in the right order. This clearly states who has the authority to do this. So if anybody has any questions, I'm open to those.
Counselor Chisholm?
I do. Did you? I don't want to go before Councillor Brown. Thank you very much. This is certainly, as you indicated, a critical document to ensure that we have best practices. You use the word checks and balances, and just a little context behind my question. I was in an industry where it was highly regulated. We were audited and audited and audited, and rightfully so because of the industry I was in. So my question rounds is, what is our practice to ensure this proven practice is working as intended?
Every year we produce documents for our auditors where they test our processes, they spot check, and it can be from cashing a check, writing a check, creating a tax bill, an assessment notice, and they look at all of our processes. So our auditors do not go through all 158,000 transactions that we do in a year. They do a sample in their audit, and then they have a materiality level that they use, and it changes based on a percentage of what our overall budget is. But also this gives our CAO and all of our directors the confidence that they have the authority to do what they do, and when they need to delegate to a manager or other person within the team, that they have a policy that they can stand behind. Did that answer your question, Councillor Chisholm?
Yes, just about contracts. And so are they tested that the right person, or are we testing that the right person is signing the documents? And human error happens, absolutely. So do we test that?
It looks like Director Rusk.
So thank you, Your Worship and members of council. I just want to maybe give a little bit of insight into our internal process as it relates to the signing of contracts. So we do have a detailed process that requires, various different levels of sign off, whether it's from our legal and risk management department, our finance department, ultimately anyone who needs to be consulted prior to that document being executed. So that, to your point about the appropriate person signing it, that's all built into that process, and then making sure ultimately that whoever is signing it, that those other appropriate checks and balances have been done prior to that as well. And so then the other part too, maybe just to remind council, is that part of the CAO bylaw requires regular reporting back to council as well, on which contracts have been signed and by who. And so that's the other piece that we have for you to support on this front as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of perhaps suggested edits to the first two document expenditures. Rather than, what it says here is purchase agreement approved within the budget and $5,000, suggesting maybe it should read up to $5,000. And the second one should read above or between $5,001 and $25,000, just something because the second one covers the first one, I suppose. But is it correctly worded, or should it just be tweaked a bit?
So I'm just trying to take my notes here. So on the first line, you're saying up to 5,000.
Yeah, instead of and. And the other one would be,
Okay,
and the other one
I
would
think
also,
that works.
yeah, and the other one would also be like greater than 5,000 or between 5,000 and 25,000, just like the third one reads.
Okay.
Yeah. And just another question around this. Do we have procurement cards, like procurement credit cards?
If I could just, sorry, if I could just interrupt. Mayor Fuel, you're not feeling well. It's fine if you want to duck out of the meeting. We understand. You have a good night and get well soon. Take care of yourself.
Okay.
Sorry, Councilor
Good
Brown.
night, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so do we have procurement cards in the town here, or is it everything done by signature at this stage?
We also have procurement cards.
Okay, and where does that fall in here?
So this would depend on the signing authority matrix. So basically supervisors have the authority to spend up to $5,000.
Mhm.
A manager is up to $25,000 in one transaction, and a director I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Can you repeat your question, Councillor Brown?
So what we're talking about here in this policy is we're talking about signatures, but what I was asking was, do we have procurement cards that perform a similar function that do not require signatures? So if a manager has a procurement card that they can spend up to $5,000 on for a purchase agreement that we already have, then that's not a signature, right? It's something different than what this policy is about.
That is correct,
What I
yes.
wanted to know was, where do procurement cards fall into the town's policy, or do we not need to define them, or should we define them in parallel? Have a separate column for includes procurement cards, or some sort of definition in this policy if they are equivalent? That's what I'm asking.
We are currently working on an administrative directive on how to use procurement cards or credit cards. I believe it was last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, when we rescinded a number of bylaws and policies that were outdated. And this is one of the few that we're still working on getting updated, and it's going to become an administrative directive that the CAO will be able to sign off on.
Okay, so it's coming in the future. It's not related to this at all and does not
That
need
is-
to be included.
that's
Okay, that's
correct.
perfect. That's all I needed to ask. Thank you very much.
So this will create efficiencies for administration?
Absolutely.
All right, and if Jim is satisfied, then I am satisfied. Oh, yeah, and Claude. Councillor Brown. That takes us to number 8. Maybe Councillor Brown has some things to say with me. Question
No, I'd
and
just like to
answer period.
Thank, yes, administration for that presentation.
That was a good addition. Thank you. Number 8.
Number 8?
Yeah. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to note that today I was privileged to join the Strathmore and Wheatland Chamber of Commerce at their annual general meeting to swear in a new director, Dan Wewell. The Chamber of Commerce is a vital link between local business community and Strathmore and Town Council, and a strong chamber is beneficial to the economic stability and growth of our community. I look forward to strengthening the relationship between the town and the Strathmore and Wheatland Strathmore and Wheatland Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to thank them for allowing me and our Economic Development Officer, Angela Greneveld, to join them today.
Very well said. Any other comments or questions from council? That moves us to number 9, and I'm looking for a motion for a closed meeting. Councillor Brown.
No, I'm going to give it to Matt.
Councillor Hyde.
I move that council moved in camera to discuss items related to sections 29(1)B, 2 of the Access to Information Act at 9:27 p.m.
All right, and if there's no comments, I'll call the question.
Sorry, Your Worship, may I ask one question?
Yep.
CAO Scoble, do we need to make a motion to extend for this? Perfect, thank you.
Good question. If there's no other comments or questions, then I'll call all in favor. And that motion is carried to the